I spend my time trying to orange pill corporations, family offices. It's all about number go up. But I think we have a different narrative because everybody here can get behind and have a responsibility to get behind. And that is freedom go up.
Future where you have unelected bureaucrats, absolutely no idea of the local situation that will impact people with the regulation that they decide on their tiny grey office without windows. Then we should not be surprised that it goes to shit.
We waste in wind energy every single day about $10 million worth of energy. That could be monetized into Bitcoin.
So, what's the next step?
We are in Bitcoin because we want to separate money from the state, we want to starve the beast.
Put your hands together and welcome to the stage this afternoon, Building a Better Europe with Bitcoin in mind. Give it up for our panelists. I was Theo from Bull Bitcoin.
I kill you.
William.
I kill you.
Give it up for Joe! Give it up for Joe!
I'm sorry, I dropped the ball.
Oh my goodness.
What a start, guys. Okay, well, thanks to Joe, we are now obligated to do a small introductory round, at least for the two guys in the middle. Hi, I'm Luke. This has been BTC Prague, and it has been a blast. So thank you all for joining us for the final panel of the event. Julian, would you like to do a quick introduction to cover for Joe? Joe's great. Joe is the best MC in the business.
I love Joe as well. My name is Julian Liniger. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Relai, and I'm really happy to be here at this amazing, leading European Bitcoin conference. Thank you for having me.
I'm Theo Mogenet. I'm the European manager of Bull Bitcoin. And as you can see, I had too many great discussions with high-value Bitcoiners these days. So if I go mute during this, for once, it's not European censorship. It's just pure biology. I don't have any voice anymore.
Hi, I'm Michal Nýdrle. I'm just a guy who is running around the city, and I invest into companies and real estate and wealth management funds in Switzerland, and I'm a partner in Invity, and my wife is running the show, so we are a couple in the Bitcoin.
Hi, I'm Richard Byworth. Hello. I'm Richard Byworth. I run an asset management business out of Switzerland called Bees Partners. We're about to launch the largest Bitcoin-denominated fund of funds globally. I also work with Relai. I sit on the board with Julian, and love being involved in that business. Fantastic business. I also work with Jan3 as an advisor to Central Asian and Latin American countries on structuring infrastructure around energy to help alleviate them from the IMF debt burden, but also use mining to build out grid infrastructure. That's about everything I do, but I do also, as Joe mentioned, do a bit of commentary on Bitcoin treasury companies, which is an interestingly contentious topic when you're talking about freedom in Bitcoin. So, yeah.
There we are, and despite the kind of light entrance that we all made, this is a serious topic, and well, maybe not as serious as Jack's talk, at least in terms of tone, I think, but building a stronger Europe, what does that mean? That is, in fact, the topic of this panel, building a stronger Europe, and any of us who live in Europe or spend time in Europe probably are aware of the current level of regulation, creeping authoritarianism, things that we all must do in order to keep living in this lovely place. I myself chose to move to Europe, to the European Union, to Finland, from Canada, which has its own problems. But it worries me every day, the slow progress of things that just make our lives harder. So how in that environment do we make a stronger Europe? I'll turn it over. Who wants to start?
Yeah, I have some thoughts. I mean, I run a business. I'm not a macro economical guy, or like I'm not a politician. So, but I can, as a young businessman, I can. There's some mistakes you can make, or some good strategic decisions you can make when you run a business. And in some sort, a business is just a lot of people coming together to go for a vision. Everyone will want to do better. Everyone wants, like, financially to do well. So the business should grow. You offer something, you get some fees for it, right? You make some money, and you try to do just a better thing, add value to society, so everyone is doing better. And you need some rules. You need some regulation also in a business, policies, etc. And if you look at different countries or continents, and like the EU, mostly Europe is the EU. So the EU, if you look at this and compare it, for example, to the US or to China or to other countries, there's some similarities and some differences. And I feel like there's something some countries do right and some do wrong. And in Europe, I feel like, for example, when it comes to pricing, the fees, there's a lot, the taxes are really, really high, for example. But what you get for it, the service, is really, really low. Like streets are not very good, the schools are not very good. Everything you get, the education is, there's not a lot of good stuff, but it's very, very expensive. You pay like 40–50% of fees, but you're not really getting anything in return. Then the regulation, the rule, there's so many rules. If you compare to other countries, there's this crazy over-regulation, etc. So I feel like. And then outsourcing, insourcing, we don't do really anything ourselves. We don't really have an industry anymore in Europe, so we outsource a lot of like energy production and stuff like that. So there's a few strategic decisions I think maybe in the last few decades went wrong with Europe. So that's basically the problem description maybe I can offer. How to build a stronger Europe? Maybe you guys have better ideas than I have.
Yeah, maybe starting for Europe. It's kind of a new term if you look at the history of our continent. It was a geographical term for really long, but if you go before the 18th century, nobody was thinking, I am a European, I'm part of a European civilization. Europe as a civilization is basically the legacy of the Greeks, of the Roman Empire and the Roman Republic, who gave us most of our institutions, the law, the fact that we have freedom, that we have contracts, that we have private property, and that's basically those institutions that made West, which is mostly Europe during most of Western history, the powerhouse of aesthetic, economic, moral, and intellectual development. Then, weirdly enough, we started referring as Europe after we became republic, or sometimes we say liberal democracies, and we never really mentioned that the European identity after the Romans was mostly Christianity, which is also really important to understand why we have all those rights, because Christianity is based on the individual, you have a direct relationship with God, so you are not ruling masses, everybody is unique, and everybody needs to have rights that are sacred. Both concepts are linked. And so I think the first thing that we can do to build a stronger Europe is to stop using this term of Europe. A French guy, which I am, a Swiss guy, which you are, German guy, a Czech guy, an Italian guy, are not the same people. We can see that in Prague when we have conversation. Some speak like that, some are less expressive with their face, some are annoying and pedantic, like the Frenchman that I am. And that's also what creates the richness of Europe. And Europe was great when it was a civilization made of different countries, of people who had rights, who had liberty, that is based from an order that is bottoms up. Everything starts from the local, you settle dispute locally, and then you have this subsidiarity idea, that's how it was called, that we inherited from the Holy Roman Empire, that you only go to higher court up to the Pope, that was also the function at the time, and we basically reversed the table by creating this monstrosity that is a mimic of the USSR with the European institutions, the European structure, where you have unelected bureaucrats that have absolutely no idea of the local situation that will impact people with the regulation that they decide from their tiny gray office without windows. And then we should not be surprised that it goes to shit. So yeah, maybe let's stop with this scam.
Well, what I heard, what I took away from that is diversity is our strength. Michal, Richard, any follow-on comments?
Well, I'm actually a strong believer in Europe. I'm supporting myself financially, creating groups which are lobbying for stronger Europe. If I look at the capital, as an entrepreneur, if I look at the capital markets, our weakness is the fragmentation of Europe. And so that's why I invest a lot of money to actually lobby in the Brussels to support 28th regime, the capital union. So I don't understand why actually we have fragmented legal systems. So when I was selling my company, which we built it with my wife, which was the largest digital communication group in Central Europe, we sold it to Publicis. And they had to do for 2 years due diligences about the law. I want 28th regime, so all the companies, they can decide where they pay taxes. In my case, I will always pay taxes in Czech Republic. I want to support this country, but I want to run the company under 28th regime. So whenever we will sell some other of our businesses, it will be easier for American or Asian or whomever investor to actually do the due diligence fast. First thing. Second thing, capital union. Our countries are fragmented. We are holding, as a European, so much money on our saving accounts. I don't have to explain you what's happening with your fiat currencies on the accounts. We just need to actually teach people to start investing into our companies, not to US companies, because 60% of global wealth is on the American stock exchange. So we need to actually support our companies to be stronger. Just tonight, I mean, you all seen it. American government stopped the latest model of Anthropic, just like that, because they don't want to give us the intelligence. And so we have to be independent. Third thing, we've got a great platform, which is united capital market, which is Bitcoin. And actually, that's the third thing which we need to teach them there in Brussels. Not only in Brussels, here in Prague and in Vienna and in Amsterdam. We need to teach them that Bitcoin is not shitcoin. It has to be regulated itself, not the same way as the others. Fourth thing, which I would actually maybe give to this panel is, I am not the fan of Plan B. I did it in 2016. We had our residency in Panama. We bought a boat in France, in La Rochelle. When we sold our businesses, we went on the boat, sailing all around the world. But then we decided, no, this is not the life we want to live. We want to support this country. So we came back, and we actually decided there were supposed to be presidential elections. And we said, you know what? There is this pro-Russian bastard, and we nominated different guy. And me and my wife, we did a presidential campaign, and that's our current president. So what I want to say, it's in our hands. You can do it. You can change it in your countries. Just get up, stand up, and do it. We have the power. I mean, you guys are the most wealthiest people in upcoming 20 years. You can do it, and you should do it. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Richard, do you have an add-on here?
So I'll step back a moment and just say, as you may recognize from my accent, I'm from the UK, but I haven't lived in the UK for 21 years. I live in Switzerland today, and over the weekend, last weekend, there was an attempted beheading on the street in Northern Ireland in broad daylight. Now, the reaction by the UK government to this has been, everybody just be calm, this is fine, we mustn't take extremist views, but the problem that they're ignoring is the fact that unfettered, uncontrolled migration is causing a huge integration problem. Living in Switzerland, I see a country that is extremely efficient. at integrating foreigners and immigrants coming into the country. It's not perfect, but at least they're thinking about it and they're controlling it in a way that allows for immigration to work. So there is a model for this to work. Either our government in the UK is completely inept and incompetent, or there's something deeper going on and they're completely corrupt. Either way, it's problematic, so I'm not going to try and lead you on a theory as to where they're going. But I would say that sitting in Switzerland and having witnessed Switzerland immediately bend to the COVID regulations that were imposed by EU was very concerning, but it had a positive effect. It woke up a lot of people across Europe. It made people realize that authoritarian government is not a positive thing. It's something that we want to escape from. Switzerland also gave up its neutrality when the Ukraine-Russia war started and was forced by the EU to give weapons to the Ukraine. This is the first time in Switzerland's history that it has moved away from neutrality, which again, sitting in Switzerland, this is EU government overstep that is very concerning. So as a positive from all of this, I spend my time trying to orange pill corporations, family offices. It's all about number go up. But I think we have a different narrative that we, as everybody here, can get behind and have a responsibility to get behind. And that is freedom go up. We need more and more people to understand that actually the way that we vote ourselves out of this is not through the elections that are propagandized to just extreme degrees that, frankly, you wouldn't believe the brainwashing in the UK. The media is very powerful. Financial Times, the BBC have been trusted institutions for years, and so people trust these media outlets. And so as a result, the propaganda is extremely effective. So by converting people to Bitcoin and helping them understand that this is the way that they vote out the power of these governments to inflict war across the world, to implement policies that are ridiculous, you're essentially defunding them. And that is I believe, the orange pill narrative that we all now need to capitalize upon with what's happening in Europe. We're seeing the fall of Europe in many different aspects. This is an opportunity for us to help people escape this nonsense system, this completely over-bloated fiat system, and basically defund, minimize the size of these governments, and move towards more of a freedom outlet.
Yeah, so that was a lot, and a little bit on the solution side, a lot about the problems. Okay, so where do we go from here? There's a saying, and I'm paraphrasing, that the US innovates, China duplicates, and the EU regulates, right? Europe regulates. And regulations have been a theme at this conference and previously. In the Bitcoin space, there's the MiCA regulation that every Bitcoin company needs to adhere to at this point, and there's also the DAC 8 that Francis talked about in yesterday's keynote. If you missed that, recommend giving that another listen, because that's really some panopticon stuff right there. The EU really seems to be turning into this surveillance state where every bit of data is collected and every regulation is bent on giving them more power and more information and less flexibility. It's like this golden cage, right? Everything is nice theoretically until it isn't. So what's the next step? You all are operating businesses that have to operate under these regulations. How does it work? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, we have heard that what is really important is innovation, capital flow. You even have made influence into politics because you've decided to invest a lot into it, right? But so regulation is actually preventing a lot of innovation and business and changing things to the better, right? And so I agree with you. We vote with our dollars whether we want more regulation or not, because if we pay more and more taxes, the taxes go up. We fund more and more of that government. We fund more and more of that regulation, and that there's real examples, like for also that it became clear here in the conference, for example, we as a MiCA-regulated company, I can tell you how hard it was and how expensive it was to get the license and to operate. There are not many companies. Probably there are not going to be more than 100 companies in Europe that will go through this and keep that up for a few years, right? It's really, so it stifles innovation and business, whereas in other countries it's much easier to get off the ground, to get a license quickly, like in El Salvador. In El Salvador, for example, you get a license to do what we are doing here in Europe probably in 2-3 months, and it costs you a few K, that's it. And here it was a big project that took us like 2 years and cost more than $1 million, right? So getting these companies, that's one thing. Then venture capital flowing into like pension funds in Switzerland and in Europe invest like 0.01%. Pension funds, it's the biggest pools of capital. They invest 0.01% into startups. You know how much it is in the US? It's like 10%. 5 to 10% of endowment funds and pension funds are invested in VC, in startups, in businesses. So guess what? That's why we have Google, Meta, Amazon, and Nvidia, and all these huge companies. They are there, not here. If we are already now, we raised 20 million. Half of that did not come from European VCs. It came from US VCs. So the capital flow is a big thing. And then product innovation, especially on the financial front, where like the whole capital flow is happening. Michael Saylor said it somewhere, that what he did with the prefs and with all these innovative financial engineering, like with Stretch, for example, these perpetual whatever, this is not possible in Europe. Just not possible. Richard, you have co-founded the first and only so far Swiss Bitcoin treasury company, had huge success. You raised a lot of money from private investors, and did it work out? No. Switzerland and Europe, it's really hard to go through all these regulations to make a success. Where in the US and many other countries, it's just much faster. That's the reason why they are more successful and prosperous as an economy. So I think one big part of the solution of building a stronger Europe would be to deregulate and to get more people into Bitcoin, to fund less the government that overregulate, and to get more people into Bitcoin where they can build wealth that they can then invest in innovation and business. So more from a overregulation to more of active economy and innovation.
Sorry, could I just maybe highlight one thing you said there when you talked about moving from euros to Bitcoin? You mentioned that obviously then that reduces the tax that gets paid to the government. Actually, what I was referring to was actually the money printing. It depowers the money printing, and this is the biggest tax, obviously, that they're inflicting. It's the biggest wallet that they have to continue going down this route of ridiculous policy, forever wars all across the world. So it's more about defunding the actual currency rather than a tax wallet, right? I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
If I can build back also on what you all said. So as Luke mentioned, we have ever more regulation, even in the Bitcoin space. And regulation is it's like regulation creates regulation. You create new regulation, it will make everything dysfunctional, people will be less happy. Then there is a political entrepreneur to say, I will fix this because he wants to earn your votes, and it creates more regulation. Then you have more bureaucrats. They need to justify their existence because they produce nothing, they are stealers. And so you need more regulation. And actually, I don't really see what in Europe we have managed to achieve to prevent this slippery slope of regulation, creating more regulation. The keynotes of the founder of the company I work for, Bull Bitcoin, that Luke mentioned, that was happening yesterday, I think could give us an idea of what we can do collectively as an industry to fight back against that. So the regulation in question is DAC 8. To explain briefly what it is, because as you mentioned, Luke, it's a real panopticon. It transforms every company that is regulated to operate as an exchange business, like Julian's company, like my company. into an arm of the surveillance state. At the moment, when you use a Bitcoin exchange, of course, you have KYC. It's a regulation. We cannot do without it. We would prefer operate without it, but we can't. But we don't automatically transfer this information to any type of institution. The few cases in which this usually happens is when you have a legal mandate because there is a criminal case that involves, imagine, kidnappings, money laundering, terrorist financing, stuff like that. And I can tell you from experience, this doesn't happen that often. So at the moment, you have plenty of different exchanges in Europe. We will have fewer because of MiCA, as Julian explained. And they all keep your data, and they try, at least I hope, to make them safe. Now, what DAC 8 will create is this regime where every company that is regulated to do this business will have to transfer all this data, so your physical address, your name, your tax identification number, your wallet addresses, your transaction history, to a giant database that will collect all this data and that will be accessible for all tax authority in the 27 member states in Europe. So imagine 1 million access. Currently in Europe, we have hacks, large hacks, almost every day. In my country, in France, these hacks have led to kidnapping. I have friends and colleagues that have been targeted. And so for us, it's personal, and I think that if we don't stop that, we might regret it down the road. And it's really difficult, of course, but a lot of companies can open new fronts. And to that effect, what we have decided to do is to challenge the French state who transposed into the local laws this European directive. And other regulated companies can do the same in other European countries, because at the end of the day, if we don't try to fight back, even if we lose, it's not important. At least we will stall them. We can amend the text. We can make some noise so that people also understand the risk that they take, and maybe they turn toward solutions that will protect them. Because even though I sell UTXO to people, if it implies putting you in danger, I mean, just do peer-to-peer exchange. In the end, like, it's not just a business, as all the co-panelists mentioned. We are in Bitcoin because we want to separate money from the state. We want to starve the beast. That's also why we create self-custodial products. That's also why we want to do that. So if we need to apply all these regulations that, of course, are sought for to prevent this plan from being executed correctly, I don't really understand how we can succeed. And so, yeah, I don't really have a one-size-fits-all solution, but maybe a bit less of apathy and just trying to sometimes draw a line in the sand and say no.
Well, actually, I decided to actually invest into Invity and buy 50% of Invity because it was established by Trezor, and you probably know Trezor. There's a sister company, Vexel, which is non-KYC, and Invity is regulated. I decided to invest into the company because the regulation was coming. Just because it stabilizes the business. Because, I mean, to be honest, we will not be living without regulation. Even I hate it as same as you. But it's the environment where we are. And I just knew that the business will be more stable, clear rules for everybody, and the better one will win. And that's the environment which I like. What I'm actually inviting you, I have 2 invitations here for you. First one, yesterday or the day before, on Thursday, we actually started this initiative of putting all the lobbyists which were visiting BTC Prague together to create a power and to be loud, same as you said. The line is here, and we have to push the line. So I'm not saying no regulation, I'm just saying there needs to be some boundaries. So MiCA 2, etc., I just want to create a force. Second invitation is Czech Republic is actually tax heaven in the European Union. I don't know if you are aware of that. There is income tax is regular, property tax zero. So, and I'm sure that all of you know that Czech National Bank is like super supportive. Like when I speak to the central bankers, and they are so like crossing fingers for us. They are so supporting us. They say, you know what? You do the fucking revolut on Bitcoin against the other banks. You do it and we support you. So actually, there are activities supporting us as Bitcoiners, even coming from the states organizations. So that's why I'm inviting you, do the residency in Prague. It's a heaven.
Okay, quite a few perspectives there. We're starting to run out of a little bit of time here. So I'll give just one perspective from where I'm sitting in Finland. We talked about this a little backstage. Is that energy plays a huge role here, and Finland, I think, I keep on thinking is one of the least insane places in Europe. It's got its problems. Taxes are fairly high and all this. But I mean, you, Julian, were saying that the services aren't that good in various places. In Finland, it's pretty good. And it's hard to kick people out of this complacency when life is actually not so bad. And one of the things driving that, I think, is also the energy, because nuclear is huge in Finland, and there's also quite a lot of Bitcoin mining being done up there, integrating into the district heating systems and things like this. It's cold a lot of the year. It's not so cold in a little bit further south, so maybe that's not such a synergy here. But yeah, I think energy is another major area where we really need to push Europe to become energy independent. I'm also from Alberta, and that's my connection to these bull folks. I'm not affiliated with them at all. I just think they're cool because they're from the only province in Canada that isn't insane. Yeah, and over there, that's the energy capital of Canada, and one of the only reasons why Canada hasn't gone completely bankrupt already. And So the thing is, Europe is also an energy-rich continent, and it might be throughout all of the states that have the energy, right? Like the oil reserves in the North Sea and this and that. But going away from policies of nuclear, that just seems like a complete own goal. And so directing towards it, and there's no such thing as an energy-poor country that is also prosperous, right? So the further away that the countries of Europe go from producing reliable energy, such as nuclear, and I mean we all hear all the green energy things, like that fossil fuels are bad and all this, but like that's how we run the modern society, right? So yeah, pursuing these policies of energy is also, in my view, one of the ways to make Europe stronger in the future.
Yep.
If I may, the meeting with the lobbyist, which I mentioned, there was a lady, and she was so right. She said, if you want to convince politicians about creating different regulation for Bitcoin or perceiving Bitcoin as a different crypto asset than the rest, start with energy. And she was right, because, for example, the politicians here in Prague, they are now creating a project for energy wasters, right? When there is a peak, the fans will start blowing, spending the energy. Now, I was like, you bastards, just don't create costs, create income. Just send it to the mining. And and it pissed me off. So I actually started today with a friend of ours, Patrick, discussing the project which we have to propose to the government. I will push it there because how the politician thinks, like, okay, these are probably some political votes. Oh, I'm actually from costs creating income. So I have to support this project, and it's easy like that. So we just have to find ways how to make people who doesn't understand our industry understand it from the politician's perspective, so it gives them a vote I don't care about votes. I just care about mining. So just push them there. This, for example, my takeout from this conference. Like, of course, it's obvious for all of you. And I just clicked in my head, like, how to actually sell it to politicians.
I think that's a very good and important point. Like, I spend a lot of time in the Bitcoin treasury space. Narrative is becoming more of a problem. There's a lot of debate right now about different things, and I think we've got exactly the same problem you're speaking to around politicians. Again, coming back to my home country of the UK, we've stopped drilling in the North Sea. We have no oil coming out of the North Sea, even though we own basically half of it. We actually buy energy from Norway and oil from Norway that is mined out of the North Sea by Norway. Okay? Again, incompetence or deliberate failure. Ed Miliband is the energy secretary in the UK. We waste in wind energy every single day about $10 million worth of energy. That could be monetized into Bitcoin. And a friend of mine, people may know him, James Van Stratton, actually bumped into Ed Miliband in his local jurisdiction of London and said, look, Ed, there's a way that you can monetize this energy, it's through Bitcoin. And his immediate reaction was, well, Bitcoin's a scam. It's like, well, even if you think it's a scam, like if you can monetize the energy, like why wouldn't you use it? But I think you've made a really important point that we need to think about the narrative with these governments. And obviously the work we do with Jan 3 is going in there, explaining to them, and you really have to take them on a journey. Like we've spent, with this Central Asian country that I'm talking about, we have spent months, if not over a year now, explaining to them the various different effects of how using mining for energy grid infrastructure expansion will lead to, obviously, their ability to attract foreign investment, all these things that go hand in hand. So it's perhaps we're out of time to think about the debate in more detail, but I think it's a really important one. I think Europe, who is on its knees right now where it comes to energy, I mean, the whole situation with Germany shutting down its nuclear power and being a victim of essentially Russians' gas supply was what potentially led Russia to feel so bold in the initiation of the war. I mean, this was predicted 15 years ago by geopoliticists. So I don't know how it's any kind of surprise to the politicians, but arguably we're just looking at complete failing politicians, government policy, and when we talk about everything that we've talked about, it all comes back to the same thing. Growing government has to create a reason for its existence. Regulation is one of those reasons. We're going down the path of centralizing everybody's data, digital IDs coming next. When you have too many riots and violent riots, which essentially you feel that you're being pushed into, when we saw the reaction to Northern Ireland, then of course that's the excuse for the next step of authoritarianism. So we have to defund this government, this overinflation of government. It comes back to freedom go up, orange pilling. That's the next phase for all of us here today.
Good one.
And you know what? Now we're over a minute over time, and so I think we can't really do another round of say last words. But I think that what you just said, Richard, was the perfect ending. So I think that's it, and we can turn it back over. But thanks all of you for sharing your vision for a stronger Europe, and for this conference, for enabling us all to come together to talk about these important things. And Bitcoin is only one aspect of building a stronger future for everyone, and it's an important tool, but keeping our eye on what's really important is the goal here. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep stacking.
Thank you, man.